My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Tonight, in a primetime exclusive, I sit down with Rudy Giuliani to ask what happened to America's favorite mayor. You're under indictment right now, accused of fraud, forgery, election tampering.
There isn't a single thing I've done that I can't explain.
Why have you been disbarred in New York? You don't filter yourself sometimes.
I'm a frustrated actor. Well, you better have your mask on tonight.
How can you have the biggest impact on America going forward? Well, tonight we're talking about the shocking rise and fall of a man once dubbed America's mayor. As a young prosecutor, Rudy Giuliani was hailed as Gotham's own crime-fighting superhero, taking down mob bosses, corrupt politicians, and greedy fat cat bankers.
He's the mayor of New York City. Ladies and gentlemen, Rudy Giuliani.
Giuliani had earned a reputation for being tough on crime as a young assistant U.S. attorney. At 39, he was appointed U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, zeroing in on organized crime and white-collar criminals.
If you violate the law, whether it's insider trading or tax evasion or fraud or bribery, a so-called white-collar crime, the overwhelming general rule is that you go to prison.
I, Rudolph William Giuliani.
After becoming mayor of New York City in 1993, Giuliani took credit for making Manhattan safe.
God bless you, Rudy. Thank you, New York, for re-electing me to a job that I love so much.
Well, after being elected mayor, Giuliani became the man who cleaned up New York City and led it through its darkest hour. No one will forget where they were when they heard that 2 airplanes had struck New York City's Twin Towers. It's a day the nation will never, ever forget.
Let's go, guys, let's go. Right here. Just stay right here. You okay? We're done.
On September 11th, Rudy Giuliani showed himself as a true leader, comforting not only a frightened city, but a frightened nation.
The city of New York and the United States of America is much stronger than any group of barbaric terrorists.
Come with us. Come with us.
That image, a mayor leading New Yorkers to safety, summed up everything he had worked for over 8 years. A powerful police force, a strong emergency management unit ready for action, all of it seemingly geared for this single moment.
New York means a tremendous amount to all of us, and we have to work together to rebuild the city of New York and the World Trade Center to be even greater and more wonderful and more beautiful than it was before.
Standing on the rubble of the fallen Twin Towers, Giuliani declared, "We will rebuild," becoming a beacon of hope and strength. But today, Rudy Giuliani faces mounting legal troubles and controversy. Tonight, in a primetime exclusive, I sit down with Rudy Giuliani to ask what happened to America's favorite mayor.
Once lauded as a voice of leadership, America's mayor has become a punchline. Using his voice to spread conspiracies and lies about the 2020 election being stolen.
I don't know what you need to wake you up. I can prove to you that he won Pennsylvania by 300,000 votes. I can prove to you that he won Michigan by probably 50,000 votes.
As former President Donald Trump's personal attorney and mouthpiece.
Let's have trial by combat.
Prosecutors say he is a target of an ongoing criminal probe examining efforts to overturn the 2020 election. And more, Giuliani is suspended from practicing law in New York.
The call for Joe Biden isn't. What was it called by? oh my goodness, all the networks. Wow. All the networks.
How are you, sir?
Great pleasure.
Good to meet you. So honored to meet you.
I must say.
Have a seat. Yeah, apparently so. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
Well,
I've enjoyed your shows forever, particularly now, and big admirer.
Well, thank you. We're focusing on things that seem to be really important right now in this country's future.
You sure do. I commend you for that.
Tell me how you're doing.
I'm doing fine, but I find it strange to describe that to people when they tell me all the things that are going on with me.
Yeah.
But I think I'm constructed that way. I like to be challenged, Phil. I don't know what it is. I feel like if things aren't, not so much going wrong, but if there aren't things I can help with, I get into a feeling of I'm a little useless.
Yeah.
So I like to be able to help, and I like to think of my life as I'm contributing. And my main goal, which I'm worried about, is a little personal goal for me, that I leave this country better than I found it, for my children, my grandchildren.
Right. Do you ever feel like you've lived your life in two parts? Because there was a time when you clearly were one of the most beloved figures in American politics, certainly leading up to the weeks and months following 9/11, which was clearly one of, if not the darkest periods in American history.
Really?
And I personally want to thank you for the leadership that you provided during that time.
Thank you.
There's no question. I think back, and I was in Dallas when those planes struck the towers, and shortly after that, there are pictures of you walking down the streets towards what was happening and speaking to the American people, speaking to the world in such an inspirational way, not cowering, not panicking, being calm. You had approval ratings then. You were America's mayor. People were talking about you as someone that would be great as a president of the United States. And then in recent years, it seems to be a different chapter in your life where you're under indictment, you're being criticized. It seems like your approval ratings have dropped 50, 60% nationally, and you're under attack. Does it seem like there's two chapters?
Well, there certainly are. There's a tremendous conflict about me. Almost a divided America. I mean, it is weird, but I can take you to places where the support for me is stronger than it was then.
This seems to be one of them. A lot of people here feel very strongly about what you gave to this country.
And then there are places where they're hateful, mean, they won't listen to my explanation. They personally feel, I think, and I'm speaking for them now, that I'm some kind of an enemy to the republic, to democracy, that I'm a liar, I'm a cheat, I'm all the things that for half my life I never was, and I put people in jail, for. Somehow I made this big change, I guess because of my attachment to Donald Trump. I think that's it. So it's a little hard. It's hard for the person to understand that when you're always, when you always view yourself as pretty much the same person. I've changed. I've learned things. I changed a lot between September 11 and after. I wouldn't deny that I'm a different person after September 11 than before. I think mostly for the good. Am I pretty much the same person, the same values that I was when I was going after the mafia and Milken and Boesky and communists, and I put Nazi war criminals in jail. I was threatened with murder by the mafia. They voted in my favor. I won 3-2.
To not kill you or kill you?
No, not kill me.
Okay.
People say to me, "What's the most important election you won?" I said, "Well, the mafia voted 3-2 not to kill me."
That's good. There have been people when you've been in the public eye that haven't I think, taken necessarily good care of you when you were on camera. You've got something on your chin right here. I'm going to tell you and let you wipe it off there. There have been times when you had something on your face and somebody didn't tell you.
Yeah, I remember that. If that's what we're going to worry about, we're in deep trouble.
Right. Hey, it's Dr. Phil here. You know I bought my first gold coin over 25 years ago. I did it to protect my family and our financial future. Now, back then, we were living in uncertain times, and the national debt was growing larger every day. And it is similar today. Higher taxes, government debt, and an unstable economy. It's more important than ever to buy gold and silver. Now, like you, I cherish my faith, my family, and my financial freedom. That's why I recommend you get the Wealth Protection Kit from Goldco, the top-rated precious metals company in the entire country. It shows you how to diversify and protect your retirement savings. Thankfully, with Goldco, you get the peace of mind that thousands of their customers have protected their money with gold and silver. They are A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau and have earned over 6,000 five-star reviews. Now, right now, you could qualify for up to 10% instant match in bonus silver while supplies last. So call Goldco at 855-969-GOLD to learn more. That's 855-969-GOLD. This message is sponsored by Greenlight. A new school year is starting soon. Now, personally, I can't believe how quickly time flies with your children. If you're a parent, you want to make this new school year an opportunity for your children to learn important life skills and continue building independence. For that, I recommend Greenlight. I love how Greenlight helps parents to raise financially smart kids. I wish I had this growing up. With Greenlight Infinity, teens can check in without needing to actually check in, thanks to family location sharing. Go ahead and shine a financially smart light on your family today. Sign up for Greenlight today and get your first month free when you go to greenlight.com/Phil. That's greenlight.com/Phil to try Greenlight for free. greenlight.com/Phil. So you're under indictment right now in Georgia?
That's right.
And Arizona?
Correct.
You're accused of all kinds of things: fraud, forgery, election tampering, goes on and on and on. Some took a plea deal. You said no, I'm not.
Correct.
I think you said, hell no, I'm not going to do that.
That was probably what I said, maybe worse.
Yeah. And you're going to fight these in Georgia and Arizona, right? And this will come to trial at some point when?
Probably after the election, Phil, I think.
Yeah.
It almost seems impossible for it to go to trial before the election. I've got no discovery on this.
Are you worried about your indictments?
I was not. I think they go because people forget that this is based on a historical precedent. In 1960, we had one of our, historically close elections, Nixon, Kennedy. The night of the election, no one knew who won. One of the states in question was the state of Hawaii, because a lot of votes were military votes, thinking of Pearl Harbor and everything else. So they made a deal that they'd keep it open until the end of December, so that even when the Electoral College voted, if they voted, let's say, for Kennedy, because the vote currently was for Kennedy, if the court proceeding that was going to take longer than that eventually awarded it to Nixon, Nixon would get his votes. Problem is, if you don't have electors, you get your votes, but they can't vote. So you get deprived of 3 votes. They don't get voted anywhere, and that reduces the majority, makes it harder to get the majority. If you win ultimately in court, your 3 people will get awarded before the vote on January 6th. Mm-hmm. They shook hands, both campaigns, both candidates, and I was a Kennedy Democrat at the time. 2 men who were great Americans. Whatever you think of them, Nixon, Kennedy, whatever you think of Kennedy's exploits or Nixon's Watergate, these are 2 men who loved America more than anything else. And they realized this is a smart way to do it, sensible way to do it. So when you go down to December, lo and behold, it changes. Nixon gets the votes. The state court said, no, Nixon won by 342 votes. And Nixon, knowing now that they didn't make a difference, shook hands with Kennedy and said, oh, let's forget it. Let's put it in the record, though, as a precedent. So 2 professors that came to us, they said, it's really important that you do this, because if you don't do this, you may win a couple of these states, and then you'll have no electoral votes. It'll be like winning them for no purpose. Now, if you want to ask me, and they can lie all they want, did I think we were going to win a couple of these states? You're damn right I thought we did. I did. I mean, whether I was right or wrong, my view as a lawyer was that if we had ever gotten a fair hearing anyplace, we'd have won every one of those states. I know the one place we got a fair hearing was the Georgia legislature. No one wants to read the report from Senator Litton after 132 witnesses that Trump won Georgia by over 10,000 votes.
You were actually disbarred for arguing this in New York and suspended in D.C. and probably will be disbarred in D.C., if not already, for arguing this.
Yes, I'm not allowed to argue the best view of the case for my client, which is they should be disbarred for that. The rule I have followed as a lawyer, which is 50 years of ethical conduct, never a complaint to the Bar Association about my misconduct. I litigated in the most contentious place in America, where if you don't have a Bar Association complaint, you're probably not doing your job. I don't know what I did. And I prosecuted, I would say, and you can dispute me if you want, I prosecuted the worst criminals of the 20th century. I do not think you'll find a more successful prosecutor in the United States of America.
Why have you been disbarred in New York, in your opinion?
Because Joe Biden and his family particularly and unusually despise me. Why? You would too, if you were as crooked as they are. For years, I told you, I met Joe in 1981. He was introduced to me by my chief of staff as, you got to go over and meet him. He's the ranking Democrat on the Senate committee. Your job as Associate Attorney General is to get 170 U.S. attorneys and U.S. marshals nominated and approved by the Senate in 1 year. He's the kind of guy you can swing over. He's bipartisan. And Jeff said, I always liked him. We had a good relationship. One thing to warn you about. You can't believe how dumb this guy is. Nicest guy, dumb as hell. But he's the nicest guy, great jokes. But you are going to come away with a lot of meetings with him saying, how can somebody be that stupid? I know it's a joke. It's not meant to be. All of what I just told you is absolutely true. So I always thought of him as a chameleon. Not evil, but he'll do anything the party. If the party puts in front of him, say that Star Wars is terrible, which turns out, of course, to be the savior of Israel. That's Iron Dome. Joe Biden was the biggest opponent of Star Wars. That's probably one of the dumbest things to have opposed. I once sat down and tried to explain to him, because I liked him. We would go to have drinks together, eat together. I would say to him, Joe, if an airplane can hit a missile in the sky and take it out, it can do that, right? Yes. And sometimes a missile can hit an airplane in the sky. Right. Why does that happen? Because one is faster than the other. I said, well, suppose we're just so much damn smarter than the Russians that we can always produce missiles that are faster than their planes. Could we take them down? Yes. He said, but that's not what it is. It's Star Wars. I said, no, that's a movie. This is what actually happens. I don't know if he was being stupid or he was being political. He refused to acknowledge it. But of course, that's what it is. It's a question of superior design, staying ahead of your enemy. But he never understood it.
And let me ask you about this. You said 50 years of practicing ethically and bringing down some of the worst criminals in our country's history. And there's no question about that. You were the first one to use the RICO Act against the mafia. Some of these guys wound up getting 100 years in prison.
Right.
That's what I mean about, like, there's two people sitting here. But in 1987, You also had prosecutors that went in and arrested and perp walked 3 traders on Wall Street, Wigton, Tabor, and Freeman. One of them, you actually put in cuffs and walked off the trading floor. And these guys, 2 of the 3, never had any charges filed against them. But yet it ruined their lives. And you said in '89 in a press conference when you were leaving as U.S. Attorney for the Southern District, yeah, if we'd have known what we now know, probably wouldn't have approved that. Was that a publicity stunt? Was it an overreach? Were these overzealous young prosecutors? How did that happen?
Yeah, it's a little of all those things. It was, one, it was not an order to handcuff him. No one planned out in advance handcuffing. When the FBI and the Postal Service people got there, in the case of Mr. Wigton, he refused to leave. Said, come back after the trading day. Federal agents aren't that nice. When you say come back after the trading day, they're going to assume you're going to change documents. So they put him in cuffs and walked him out. The second guy got equally nasty with them, and they did that. The third guy, they didn't walk out. So it wasn't as planned as the next day. The newspapers loved the story and made it into a story that it was orchestrated by me. It wasn't orchestrated, it was happenstance. Did it have a good effect in a strange but somewhat unfair way? Yes. It scared the living daylights out of the Wall Street crooks. Now you say, well, were they Wall Street crooks? One of them went to jail for a deal of time. The other 2 weren't as seriously implicated, but they did cooperate. And they didn't get out because they were men of the year. They testified. A lot of people were never charged and testified for the government.
Was that prosecutorial abuse? Was it an overreach?
The putting of the handcuffs on was. They shouldn't have had the handcuffs on. To this day, I don't think it should have been done. And I do think, but I can't be 100% sure, that if they called me, I would have told them no. I didn't say that until years later, because I don't push off responsibility on the agents. I don't say, well, they made a decision I wouldn't make. They did. But they're agents. They have a tougher life than I do. Maybe if I were them, I would have made the same decision. The final thing, the idea that they were choir boys is ridiculous. They testified against the other 2. The other 2 just were far more guilty. We ended up putting 14 people in jail in that investigation.
And this 2 chapters that I'm talking about, this RICO that you used against Mafia, is now being used against you.
Yeah, right. I started it, and now they're using it against me for all I can figure out is advocating for my client, but saying things they believe to be false. So if I say that there appeared to be fraudulent absentee ballots because my witnesses say that they had never been folded and they look pristine, they will say that I am perpetrating a claim of election fraud. But that's what I was told.
Well, they're doing this under Rule 11, right? You, as an officer of the court, you can't make a filing. You can't sign something.
I can't make a filing that says no one has found me violated Rule 11. No one has found that.
But they've disbarred you because they say you're making claims that aren't warranted by existing law or evidence.
That's an issue on appeal. No one at the trial, the judge, my adversaries, at the conclusion of the trial, no one found I did anything ethical. No one, I've not been held guilty of violating.
Well, they didn't disbar you for being ethical.
They disbarred me on a separate proceeding brought by a political operative who had nothing to do with the trial, claiming I did all these things, and they refused to allow me to let in most of my evidence. For example, the judge refused to consider the fact that I have 12 hours of tape from Atlanta, 4 different perspectives of what went on in that hall in which I say thousands of votes were stolen. Lo and behold, when we get ready to go to trial, I realized that they had given me tapes with 3 hours missing. Not only are they giving me tapes with 3 hours missing, they had re-engineered them so the tapes looked like they were continuous. I proved that. I had the witnesses ready to prove it. And the judge, who was a product of the crooked Democratic political machine, refused to allow that tape in evidence. That tape would have conclusively proven that the very, very famous Secretary of State in Georgia, Ratzenberg, had produced an altered tape and that the prosecutor had offered it. It gets worse than that. The hours that were altered were the hours in which the alleged misconduct took place. So they're gone, bye-bye. The reason is the pictures would have demonstrated the multiple counting of ballots, the fact that people were thrown out so they couldn't see what happened, the fact that Biden got 200,000 votes at one period of time and Trump got about 80, which is impossible. The fact that the ballots were like this. That cannot be an absentee ballot. An absentee ballot, to be valid, has to be folded, cannot be signed, has to be in an envelope that is signed, in another envelope that's signed. Reason for that is you shouldn't be able to connect the final vote with a person because your vote is anonymous. All of those envelopes that you're talking about, you know how many are missing? From a state that should have been really careful if it were so interested in being as honest as Kemp and Ratzenberger say, 375,000 are missing. Just about the number that we estimated was the number that was fraudulent. So what the Bar Association did was, they haven't found a single lawyer involved in a single case with me that said I did a single unethical thing. All the allegations come from outside Democratic advocates, many of whom are paid for huge amounts of money. The women who obtained the $145,000 judgment against me have paid about $4 or $5 million.
$145 million.
$145 million judgment, which is a ridiculous judgment. There's no way they had $145 million worth of damages. It's completely absurd. The lawyer representing them is Hunter Biden's classmate.
How did they get the judgment?
They got the judgment by going before a judge named Beryl Howell. They picked the judge. Beryl Howell was the most bloodthirsty judge in the District of Columbia.
Did you make admissions against interest in that case?
I did not. She concluded that my failure to discovery showed that I was guilty, which is absurd. The reason I couldn't make discovery is the FBI had seized most of my material, and she would not allow that as an excuse. She should never have gotten the case. Case took place in Georgia, not Washington.
Are you
it was there because it was fixed.
Are you going to represent yourself?
No, I'm being represented by Ken Caruso, who was my junior partner, my assistant U.S. attorney, who I trained, and is better than me.
He's better than you.
Well, I trained him.
Yeah. Well, you've had some pretty wild interviews, would you agree? Where you certainly speak out in an unfiltered sort of way.
Yeah, I think it's called telling the truth.
You don't filter yourself sometimes.
Well,
I'm not saying you should, I'm just saying you don't.
Just give me an example I can tell you.
Okay, well, let's take a look at some of those.
She said, you did a wonderful job on September 11. And therefore, I'm making you an honorary knight, commander of the Royal something or other. I turned down a knighthood because if you took a knighthood, you had to lose your citizenship. I know Prince Andrew is very questionable now. I never went out with him. Ever. Never had a drink with him. Never was with a woman or a young girl with him. Ever.
This message is sponsored by Greenlight. A new school year is starting soon. Now, personally, I can't believe how quickly time flies with your children. If you're a parent, you want to make this new school year an opportunity for your children to learn important life skills and continue building independence. For that, I recommend Greenlight. I love how Greenlight helps parents to raise financially smart kids. I wish I had this growing up. With Greenlight Infinity, teens can check in without needing to actually check in, thanks to family location sharing. Go ahead and shine a financially smart light on your family today. Sign up for Greenlight today and get your first month free when you go to greenlight.com/Phil. That's greenlight.com/Phil to try Greenlight for free. Greenlight.com/Phil. People said you were mocking the Queen with an English accent.
Oh, gee. I'm sorry, Queen. I like the Queen. Unfortunately, I'm a frustrated actor. And I do imitations. Like, I imitate some of the dictatorial Democratic governors. You know, things like, well, you better not have you better have your mask on tonight. If you don't, you have your COVID card? Let me see your COVID card. You no move without your COVID card. You know, like the red Chinese loving governor of Minnesota who's been in China 30 times. I can't do a Chinese accent as well, but for him, I should do one. He's been in China more than Minnesota.
Well,
and he thinks it's nice. He thinks China's nice. He also says things like, one man's communism is another man's neighborliness. Except neighborliness never killed 200 million people. Socialism, I think is what he said, killed over 200 million people. Now, you can be a naive and think socialism is just another economic system, blah, blah, blah. But if you've been to China 30 times and you ain't figured out the difference between socialism and humane, decent human policy, there's something really wrong with you. Deeply wrong with you. And don't put somebody like that within 1,000 miles of having control over you, your lives, or your children's, because they're going to belong to the Chinese when they're finished.
All right, well, let's take a look at this one and let you explain what's going on here. I'll just let you put this in context.
There's nothing wrong with taking information from Russians.
There's nothing wrong with taking
information. Depends on where it came from.
The reason to keep all these things together is precisely to avoid what the Democrats did in this election, which is to misuse the absentee ballot process and the mail-in ballot process in order to cheat.
How's that guy a general? Jesus. The other day, he said that the Bagram Air Force Base is not strategically important. I wanted to grab his, what do you have, 5 stars, 10 stars, 12 stars? He has so many stars that coming up into his ears. I wanted to grab his stars, shove it down his throat and say, it's 400 miles from China.
Well, those are all very different. Let me explain them. There isn't a single thing I've done that I can't explain. Most of what we're living through, which I think a lot of people have a hard time rejecting, is this is not accidental destruction of the United States or accidental destruction of our moral basis or an accidental destruction of our belief in God or an accidental destruction of our belief in the national anthem or an accidental destruction of our love of the flag so we can burn it or an accidental destruction of we can walk out on our unit before it goes into battle or an accidental destruction of saying things like, well, socialism is really nice. And I've been there, I know. This is coming from 175 years ago from a man named Karl Marx. I am a scholar on Karl Marx. I graduated from college with a minor degree in philosophy. Marx was the minor degree. I was there for the tail end of the Cold War. I developed Pfizer. I did the first 50 Pfizer wires. None of them contain a lie, like the one with Jim Comey. I know the danger of communism. I've known it was going to happen. I knew it was going to happen. I knew even when Reagan beat Russia, and I was so close to Reagan, I would consider him a second father. And his mother, his wife, I adored. I got her a letter from Bibi Netanyahu saying, if it wasn't for your husband, we wouldn't have had Iron Dome. And if it wasn't for Iron Dome, 100,000 Israelis or more would die. Who was against Iron Dome? The demented one of the White House and the silly woman that's running for president. They were both against it. They were against everything that could help the United States. Quote, cabinet officer Gates, Democrat, served with him. Joe Biden's been wrong about every matter of foreign policy in his career. He's giving you a signal. He doesn't have the guts, doesn't have to say, hey, come on, the red Chinese own him. Unfortunately, the red Chinese own more people around here than you think. And your country's being sold out for you. Do you think that when Joe Biden gave up the Bagram Air Base, 400 miles from China, during the time he was selling us out in Afghanistan, do you think it occurred to him that his family 6 years leading up to that, had gotten $61 million from China. That's not a guess. I have the documents in my room showing it to you. Now, they say, oh, the money didn't go to him, except there's a text hidden even by the conservative media very often that says, from Hunter Biden to his daughter, that he's very upset that for 35 years, I have had to give half of my income to my father. You're telling me there's no evidence that he got money? What is evidence? Evidence is testimony. That's evidence. You can't walk away from trial by just saying it's not evidence unless you are a protected Democrat in what has become a system of justice that would fit Nazi Germany, the Soviet Union, Venezuela, but not our great country.
Do you think that when you're talking about Biden in this regard, do you think he's weak or you think he's bought?
I don't know, Phil. I don't know. I never able to conclude those ultimate things about the people I prosecuted, right? Some of them were better than others. I mean, Fat Tony Salerno was a nicer man than John Gotti, but they both killed 100 people. Fat Tony Salerno didn't like killing people. John Gotti enjoyed going to the murders. Criminals of all different types. And Biden has always had the stupidity factor and now the dementia factor. So you have to give Biden, I hate to say this, and some of my friends are going to shoot me now I said this. You have to, but I'm a lawyer. You have to give Biden a little buy on his mental capacity. Biden would be, right now, up until a couple of years ago, I've always said, I'll go prosecute. I offered Trump to prosecute Hillary. He didn't want to do it. He didn't think it was, this is why it gets me so angry when they say he's against democracy, da-da-da-da-da. Biden's against democracy. And Harris, he's not. He had a chance to do it. I'd have done it for him. I'd have prosecuted Hillary in a minute. It'd have been the greatest honor of my life to put that miserable crook in jail. I mean, I believe in justice. I don't dislike people. I feel sorry for some of the people I put in jail. But I believe in justice. And I also believe all the garbage we're talking about, there's only one way we end this. You put the bad guys in jail. You put the bad guys in jail, the bad guys get scared, and they stop for a while.
I want to look at a map and get your opinion about this. This is where China has been allowed to purchase farmland, ranch land around our strategic military installations in the United States. And to me, this is really disturbing. We certainly could not go to China and purchase land around the Chinese military
100%, Phil.
But we've got China purchasing land around Camp Pendleton, around Hill Air Force Base, around Fort Liberty, the Naval Air Station. They're setting up wind farms around some of these places where there's no wind, there's no propellers on the towers. There are listening devices, not propellers. How are we so asleep that we're allowing China to purchase land around all these military installations? How is this happening?
It's happening because China has, with a number of different strategies, some of which conflict with each other, has brainwashed us. So you can take aggressive strategy or very, very soft strategy. The Chinese were always much better at infiltration than the Russians. I'm going back to the 40s and the 50s. The Russians got all the attention for it. The Chinese got a major break when Kissinger and Nixon, I'm not criticizing it, because at the time, you had to make a decision. We got to separate China and Russia if we're going to win the Cold War. We can't fight both of them. So they decided, incorrectly, but I would not say unfair to them, because I might have decided the same thing with the facts they had. They decided China is not as dangerous as Russia, because Russia had more arms, and China's real poor. How far can they go with all that poverty? So let's go with China. Let's become friends with China. Let's utilize the 2,000-year anger and hatred between China and Russia, And we went with China, and we got fooled. We went too far. Was the initial decision correct? You're darn right. Do Nixon and Kissinger deserve, I don't know, the kind of awards that Arafat got? Yeah. As the years went by, China being a bad country became clearer and clearer and clearer and clearer and clearer and clearer. I agreed with them at the beginning. I can't tell you when I broke away. Probably Tiananmen. And this was always my area of great interest. Cold War, China, Russia. Paid more attention to that than all the things that you've known me for. I wanted to be Secretary of State. That was my real goal as president. I think I know more about foreign countries than any of them, but I'm just an egotist. And then from Tiananmen Square on, it's been killing girl babies, wiping out the Uyghurs. They do a pretty damn good job of not calling it genocide, but wiping out Christians. They'll wipe out any Muslims that they can't make a deal with. They hate Muslims, they hate Christians, they hate Jews, they hate anybody with a religion. Mao Zedong, who's really the architect of their China, is even more understands the danger of religion even more than the Russians did. The Russians always had what you would call a conflict with religion, because a lot of them, even though they were communists, were Russian Orthodox. They remain Russian Orthodox. Like even Putin, if you know him, and I know him a little bit, and I talk religion to him, because he once, like me, thought of studying for a priest. It's the only thing we have in common.
You thought about being a priest?
Yeah. What a disaster that would have been. Oh, wow.
Well, what do you do from here forward? How can you have the biggest impact on America going forward? Well, we're out of time for tonight, but there's so much more to talk about. With all his recent legal troubles, was there ever a time Rudy Giuliani thought that he was in too deep, but just couldn't turn back? And how does he respond to allegations and sincere concerns that he may have a drinking problem? I want to talk about you. What's the next chapter in your life?
Help Donald Trump straighten out the federal government. I can smell the crooked politicians. They have a certain odor.
A lot of people say you drink too much.
Oh, geez, Doc.
You're disbarred, indicted, have huge multi-million-dollar judgments against you. Is there anything you would do different?
That's a really good question.
Is there a chance you're going to wind up in prison? Next week on Fill in the Blanks.